Daniel Hayes had never felt so small in his entire life. He stood in the middle of a hall so big that he could not see the ceiling. The walls were made of some kind of white stone that seemed to glow from inside. Thousands of aliens filled the space around him, and every single one of them was looking at him like he was a bug that had crawled into their food. Daniel was a commander in the Earth space fleet. He was 42 years old, had fought in 3 battles, and had never been afraid of anything. But standing here, in the throne hall of the Valkyrie Empire, he felt like a child who had walked into a room full of giants. The Valkyrie Queen sat on a throne at the far end of the hall. She was tall and thin, with skin that looked like silver metal. Her eyes had many parts, like an insect, and they seemed to see everything at once. She had ruled her empire for over 2,000 years. Her people had been traveling between stars when humans were still living in caves. Emma Grant stood next to Daniel. She was his aide, a young lieutenant with short brown hair and sharp eyes. She leaned close to him and whispered through the translator device in his ear. "They hate us," she said quietly. "Every single one of them thinks we are nothing." Daniel did not answer. He knew she was right. Humanity had only discovered faster than light travel 40 years ago. Before that, humans had thought they were alone in the universe. They had been wrong. The galaxy was full of life, full of civilizations that had existed for thousands and thousands of years. And to these ancient races, humans were nothing but children. Primitive, weak, not worth their time, but humanity needed friends. That was why Daniel was here. Back home, Earth was in danger. A species called the Korthax was expanding across the galaxy. The Korthax were a hive mind, millions of creatures that shared one brain. They did not negotiate. They did not make peace. They simply absorbed other species into their collective, or they destroyed them completely. Earth was in their path. The only hope for humanity was to join the Valkyrie Empire as allies. The Valkyrie were powerful enough to stand against the Korthax. If they agreed to protect Earth, humanity might survive. If they refused, Earth would be alone. A creature that looked like a snake with arms slithered to the center of the hall. This was Vazith, the Queen's herald. His voice was loud and cold. "Her Eternal Majesty has called this assembly," Vazith announced. "The Korthax Collective has declared war upon the Empire. After 800 years of peace, the hive mind attacks us once more. The Queen seeks to know what each species will contribute to this fight." One by one, the alien ambassadors stepped forward to speak. The first was a Draenei, a creature that looked like a giant insect with hard shell armor. His name was Korath, and he was an admiral in their fleet. "The Draenei pledged 100,000 warships," Korath said proudly. "Our soldiers number in the billions. We will crush the Korthax as we have crushed every enemy before." The hall rumbled with approval. Next came the Luminari, beings made of light that floated above the ground. Their priest spoke in a voice like singing. "The Luminari offer our psionic warriors. We will enter the minds of the enemy and break them from within. Our power is unmatched." More approval. More praise. Daniel watched as species after species made their pledges. Millions of soldiers. Hundreds of thousands of ships. Weapons that could destroy entire planets. Technologies that humans could not even understand. And then it was his turn. The hall fell silent. Every eye turned to the small human standing alone in that vast space. Daniel felt his heart beating hard in his chest. His mouth was dry. He had prepared a speech, full of careful words that promised much but committed to little. But looking around at all these powerful beings, he knew that empty words would mean nothing. The Queen leaned forward on her throne, her many eyes fixed on him, and Daniel felt like she could see straight through his skull and into his thoughts. "Speak, young one," she said. Her voice was like metal scraping on stone. "What does your kind bring to this alliance?" Daniel took a deep breath. Behind him, Emma squeezed his arm once, a silent message of support. "Your Majesty," he began, keeping his voice steady, "humanity cannot match the armies in this hall. We have 17 ships. Our soldiers number in the thousands, not billions. We have no ancient weapons, no psionic powers, no technologies passed down through ages." A Dranathi ambassador made a clicking sound with his mouth. It was laughter. "Then why are you here?" Someone called out. "Go home, little creature. This is not your war." Daniel ignored the insult. He kept his eyes on the Queen. "What humanity brings," he continued, "is something different. We bring our refusal to die." The laughter stopped. The hall grew quiet again. 40 years ago, the Korthax found our planet. A scouting group entered our solar system. They destroyed our colony on Mars, 100,000 people killed in a single day. We had no warning. We had no defense. We did not even know aliens existed. He paused, letting the translator carry his words to every corner of the hall. We had no faster-than-light engines, no energy shields, no plasma weapons. We had chemical rockets, nuclear bombs, and a burning need to survive. Within 6 months, we had taken apart the enemy ship and learned how it worked. Within 2 years, we had built our own interstellar vessels. The Queen's expression did not change, but she seemed to be listening more closely now. The Korthax came back with a larger force. They expected to find us broken and waiting for death. Instead, they found a species that had learned their language, studied their tactics, and set traps throughout our asteroid belt. We destroyed that entire fleet. Every single ship. Silence. Complete silence. "Your Majesty, I will not lie and say we can match the power gathered here. But I can tell you this. We are the only species in known history to defeat the Korthax while being weaker than them. We did not win because we were stronger. We won because we refused to accept that we had already lost." The Queen raised one hand and the hall somehow became even more quiet. "You speak of one battle," she said slowly. "The Korthax have eaten whole civilizations. Your victory may have been luck." Daniel nodded. "Maybe it was luck. But my people have a saying. Luck is just being ready when the moment comes. And we are always ready." He looked around at the assembled aliens, at these ancient beings who saw humanity as insects. "We do not fight fair," he said. "We fight to win. And we never, ever give up." The Queen stared at him for a long moment. Her face showed nothing. "Interesting," she said finally. "We shall see if your words have any truth behind them." She waved her hand, and Daniel knew he had been dismissed. He stepped back, his legs shaking slightly. Emma caught his arm. "That was either the bravest thing I have ever seen," she whispered, "or the stupidest." Daniel did not know which one it was either, but he had spoken the truth. Now all he could do was wait and see what the Queen would decide. The fate of humanity hung in the balance. The assembly continued for 3 more hours after Daniel spoke. He stood in his place, watching and listening as the alien ambassadors discussed their plans for war. Nobody spoke to him. Nobody even looked at him. It was as if he had become invisible. Emma stood beside him, her face calm but her eyes worried. She had been sending reports back to Earth through a secure channel. Daniel knew that millions of people were watching this moment, waiting to learn if humanity would have allies or stand alone. Finally, the Queen raised her hand again. The hall fell silent at once. "We have heard from all who wish to speak," she announced. "The War Council will begin tomorrow. You are all dismissed." The aliens began to leave, flowing out through the massive doors like water from a broken dam. Daniel started to follow them, but a voice stopped him. "Human, stay." It was the Queen. Her many eyes were fixed on him once more. Daniel's heart began to pound again. Emma looked at him with fear in her eyes, but he shook his head slightly. Whatever happened, he would face it. The hall emptied until only Daniel, Emma, the Queen, and a few of her guards remained. The space felt even larger now, the silence even deeper. The Queen rose from her throne and walked down the steps toward them. She moved slowly, with the careful grace of someone who had all the time in the universe. When she reached them, she stood so close that Daniel could see the tiny lines on her silver skin. "Your name is Daniel Hayes," she said. It was not a question. "Yes, Your Majesty. And you truly believe your species can contribute to this war? 17 ships against the Korthax?" Daniel met her gaze, even though every part of him wanted to look away. "I believe we can help, yes. Maybe not in the way the other species can help. But we have skills they do not have, such as we know how to fight when we are weak. We know how to win when winning seems impossible. Every day of our history, humans have faced enemies bigger and stronger than themselves. Other humans, wild animals, disease, nature itself. And we are still here. We survive. We adapt. We find ways to win." The Queen was quiet for a long moment. Then she did something that surprised Daniel completely. She laughed. It was not a cruel laugh. It was soft, almost gentle, like she had heard something that truly amused her. "You remind me of my own people," she said. "Long ago, before we built our empire, the Volcari were prey. Weak creatures hunted by predators we could not hope to defeat. We lived in fear. We hid in caves. We watched our children being eaten." She turned and walked a few steps away, looking up at the high ceiling of the hall. "But we survived. Not because we were strong, but because we were clever. We learned. We adapted. We found ways to turn our weakness into strength. And now look at us. We rule 1,000 star systems. We have lived for 10,000 years." She turned back to Daniel. "Perhaps your species has that same fire inside. Or perhaps you are simply fools who do not know when to give up. Either way, I find you interesting." Daniel did not know what to say to that, so he said nothing. "I have a test for you, Daniel Hayes. A way for humanity to prove its worth." Emma stepped forward. "Your Majesty, what kind of test?" The Queen smiled. It was not a warm smile. "The Korthax have built a forward base in the Vulture system. They have gathered 500 warships there. 3 times, my fleets have tried to destroy that base. 3 times, they have failed. Many good soldiers have died." She fixed her eyes on Daniel. "I want you to destroy that base. You and your human soldiers." The words hit Daniel like a punch to the stomach. 500 Korthax warships. 3 failed attacks by forces far more powerful than anything humanity possessed. This was not a test. This was an execution. "Your Majesty," he said carefully, with respect, "that is not a test. That is suicide. Perhaps. Or perhaps it is a chance for humanity to prove everything you have said today. If you succeed, you will have the gratitude of the Empire. If you fail, then your species was never worth saving anyway." Daniel's mind raced. He thought about Earth, about his family, about the thousands of soldiers who would follow him into that battle. He thought about the Korthax, the endless hunger of the hive mind that wanted to absorb all life into itself. He thought about his grandfather, who had fought in the last great war on Earth. The old man had once told him something that Daniel had never forgotten. Sometimes the only way out is through. When there is no safe path, you pick the dangerous one and run as fast as you can. Daniel took a deep breath. "We will need 3 weeks to prepare," he said. "And I need the authority to plan and execute the mission my own way, without interference from your commanders." The Queen raised an eyebrow. "You have conditions?" "I have requirements. If I am going to do the impossible, I need the freedom to do it my way." For a long moment, the Queen simply stared at him. Daniel could feel Emma holding her breath beside him. Then the Queen nodded. "Granted. You will have your 3 weeks and your freedom. Do not disappoint me, Commander Hayes. The universe is watching." She turned and walked back toward her throne. The audience was over. Daniel and Emma walked out of the hall in silence. Only when they were outside, standing in the bright light of an alien sun, did Emma finally speak. "Are you insane?" she asked. 500 ships? We have 17. 17, Daniel. Daniel looked up at the sky. Somewhere out there, Earth was waiting for news. Somewhere out there, the Korthax were preparing to destroy everything humanity had ever built. "I know the numbers," he said quietly. "But numbers are not everything. The Korthax are a hive mind. They think as one. They act as one. They have never faced an enemy that does not follow the rules." "And we do not follow the rules?" Daniel smiled grimly. "Emma, humanity invented breaking the rules. Every war we have ever fought, we found new ways to kill each other. New weapons, new tactics, new forms of cruelty and courage. The Korthax have never seen anything like us." He started walking toward the shuttle that would take them back to their ship. "Contact Earth. Tell them we have a mission. And tell Admiral Grace Collins that I need her help planning the most insane attack in human history." Emma hurried after him. "And if it does not work? If we fail?" Daniel did not slow down. "Then we die. But we die fighting. And we take as many of those bastards with us as we possibly can." He climbed into the shuttle and sat down, his mind already working on the problem. 500 enemy ships. 3 weeks. 17 human vessels. Impossible odds. Just the way humanity liked it. 2 weeks passed like water through open fingers. Daniel had set up his command center on the human carrier ship called the Endeavor. It was the largest vessel in their tiny fleet, though it would look like a toy next to the massive warships of the elder races. But size was not what mattered. What mattered was the people inside. The planning room was full of men and women who had volunteered for this mission. Every single one of them knew they might not come back. Every single one of them had chosen to come anyway. Admiral Grace Collins stood at the main display, her gray hair pulled back tight, her eyes sharp as knives. She had commanded the defense of Earth 40 years ago, when the Korthax first attacked. She was 73 years old now, but her mind was still the sharpest military brain humanity had ever produced. "The problem is simple," Grace said, pointing at the holographic map of the Valdris system. "The Korthax base is located on this moon. They have 500 ships in orbit, plus ground defenses, plus the ability to call for reinforcements from neighboring systems. A direct attack is impossible." "Then we do not attack directly," Daniel replied. He was standing at the other end of the table, arms crossed, thinking hard. Kevin Park raised his hand. He was a young man, only 25, with a face that looked too innocent for war. But Kevin was the best demolitions expert in the entire fleet. He had once destroyed an enemy fuel depot using nothing but stolen chemicals and a broken clock. "What if we do not try to destroy the whole base at once?" Kevin asked. "What if we hit multiple targets at the same time? Smaller teams, multiple strikes, spread their defenses thin." Grace nodded slowly. "Guerrilla tactics. Hit and run. It could work, but we would need to get past their patrols first. The Korthax have sensors everywhere. They would see us coming from light years away." Emma pulled up another display. She had been working day and night, gathering intelligence from every source she could find. "Not necessarily. Look at this." The display showed captured data from Korthax communication systems. "The hive mind thinks as one brain. Every ship, every soldier, every sensor station reports to the Central Intelligence. But that creates a weakness. When too much information comes in at once, the system gets slow, confused. Daniel leaned forward. You are saying we can overload them? I am saying we can create chaos. Send false signals. Make them see threats that are not there. And while they are chasing ghosts, our real teams slip through. Grace studied the data carefully. This would require perfect timing. Every team would need to act at exactly the right moment. One mistake, and the whole plan falls apart. Humans are good at timing, Daniel said. We have been coordinating complicated attacks for thousands of years. The Corthax have never fought an enemy that thinks like we do. They expect direct confrontation. They expect the bigger force to win. They do not expect this. He pointed at the map. Here is what I am thinking. We divide our forces into small teams. Each team infiltrates a different part of the system. Kevin and his people hit the power stations. Another team takes out their communication relays. A third team attacks their fuel depots. And a fourth team, the biggest one, creates a diversion that draws their main fleet away from the base. And then? Grace asked. And then the Imperial fleet comes in and finishes them off. We crack the shell. They crush what is inside. The room was quiet for a moment. Everyone was thinking about what this plan meant. Small teams against 500 ships. Infiltration into the heart of enemy territory. No backup. No rescue if things went wrong. Finally, a woman named Lisa Cole spoke up. She was a pilot, one of the best, with scars on her face from battles she had barely survived. I volunteer for the diversion team. Someone has to keep those bastards busy while the others do their work. Count me in for the power stations, Kevin said. I have been wanting to blow something up for weeks. One by one, volunteers stepped forward. Nobody was forced. Nobody was ordered. They chose to go because they understood what was at stake. Not just their own lives, but the future of their entire species. Daniel felt his throat tighten. These were the finest soldiers humanity had ever produced. And he was sending them into what might be their deaths. Thank you, he said quietly. All of you. I will not make speeches about glory or honor. You know what we are facing. You know the odds. What I will say is this. The universe thinks we are nothing. The elder races look at us and see insects. Today, we prove them wrong. Today, we show them what humans are made of. Grace stepped forward. The plan is good, Daniel. But there is one thing you have not mentioned. What happens if we succeed? What comes after? Daniel looked at her. If we succeed, we live. If we succeed, Earth is safe. If we succeed, humanity takes its place among the stars. That is what comes after. The next week was a blur of preparation. Teams trained for their specific missions. Equipment was checked and double-checked. Everyone wrote letters to their families, letters that would only be sent if they did not return. On the night before the attack, Daniel walked through the ship, talking to his people. He found Kevin Park in the mess hall, eating a simple meal of bread and soup. Nervous? Daniel asked, sitting down across from him. Kevin shrugged. A little, but mostly I am excited. Is that strange? No, I felt the same way before my first battle. The fear mixes with something else, something that makes you feel alive. My father was a soldier, Kevin said. He died when I was 12. Corthax attack on a mining station. I always wondered what his last moments were like. Whether he was afraid. Whether he thought about me. Daniel was quiet for a moment. I'm sure he thought about you. Parents always think about their children, especially at the end. Kevin nodded. That is why I volunteered. Not for revenge. Not for glory. Just because I want my children, if I ever have them, to live in a universe where they do not have to be afraid. Daniel reached across the table and gripped Kevin's shoulder. "That is the best reason to fight there is." The next morning, the teams deployed. 17 ships scattered across the darkness of space, each one carrying soldiers who had said goodbye to everyone they loved. Daniel watched them go from the bridge of the Endeavor. Emma stood beside him, her face pale but determined. "It begins," she said softly. Daniel nodded. "It begins. And whatever happens next, the universe will never forget what we did here." He turned to the communication officer. "Send the signal to the Imperial fleet. Tell them to be ready. In 18 hours, the Korthax base will be burning." The officer nodded and began transmitting. Daniel looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, his people were flying toward their destiny. Some would live. Some would die. But all of them would fight. That was what it meant to be human. Kevin Park crawled through a maintenance tunnel that smelled like burned metal and alien chemicals. Behind him, 3 other soldiers followed in silence. They had been moving through the Korthax supply station for 4 hours, avoiding patrols, hiding in dark corners, waiting for the exact moment to strike. His heart was pounding so hard. He was sure the enemy could hear it. The infiltration had been the hardest part. Kevin's team had approached the station in a captured Korthax shuttle, using transponder codes that Emma had stolen from enemy communications. The hive mind had let them dock without question. Why would they suspect anything? No enemy had ever tried something so crazy before. Now they were deep inside enemy territory, carrying enough explosives to turn the entire power station into dust. Kevin checked his watch. 12 minutes until the signal. Across the Valdris system, other teams were doing the same thing. Lisa Cole and her pilots were waiting in hidden positions, ready to create the diversion that would draw the enemy fleet away. Another team was preparing to destroy the communication relays. A third was targeting the fuel depots. Everything depended on timing. If even one team moved too early or too late, the whole plan would fall apart. Kevin reached the end of the tunnel and looked out through a grate. Below him was the main power core, a massive machine that provided energy to the entire Korthax base. Hundreds of workers moved around it, strange creatures with too many arms and no faces. They were all connected to the hive mind, all thinking the same thoughts, all serving the same purpose. He placed his first explosive charge carefully, making sure it was hidden from view. Then he moved to the next position, and the next, and the next. His team spread out, each person covering a different section of the station. 10 minutes. In orbit above the base. The Korthax fleet sat in perfect formation. 500 warships, each one bristling with weapons, each one crewed by creatures that felt no fear and knew no mercy. They had destroyed entire civilizations. They had conquered hundreds of worlds. And they had no idea what was about to hit them. 8 minutes. Lisa Cole sat in the cockpit of her fighter, waiting in the shadow of an asteroid. Her squadron was made up of 12 pilots, all volunteers, all knowing that their job was to make themselves targets. They would attack the fleet directly, drawing as many ships away from the base as possible. "Remember," she said through the comm system, "we are not trying to win this fight. We are trying to make noise. Hit them hard, make them angry, then run like hell. Keep moving, keep shooting, and do not let them pin you down." "Understood, Captain," came the replies. 5 minutes. Daniel stood on the bridge of the Endeavor, watching the tactical display. Behind him, the Imperial fleet waited in hyperspace, ready to jump into the system the moment the signal came. Admiral Karath, the Dranathi commander who had once laughed at humanity, was now following Daniel's orders without question. "This is insane," Karath had said when Daniel explained the plan. "Your people are either the bravest soldiers I have ever seen or the most foolish. Why not both?" Daniel had replied. 2 minutes. Kevin finished placing his last charge. He looked at his team members, seeing the fear and determination in their eyes. They had trained for this moment. They were ready. 1 minute. Emma counted down the seconds on the Endeavor. 60 seconds. 50, 40, 30. The universe seemed to hold its breath. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Now. Kevin pressed the detonator. The explosion was beautiful and terrible at the same time. Fire erupted throughout the power station, tearing through metal and flesh and machine. The lights went out across an entire section of the Korthax base. Alarms began to scream. Across the system, other explosions followed. Communication relays turned into shrapnel. Fuel depots became balls of flame. The Korthax hive mind, which had been calm and organized moments before, suddenly found itself blind and confused. Lisa Cole led her squadron out of hiding and straight into the enemy fleet. All ships, attack! 12 small fighters against 500 warships. It should have been suicide. But Lisa was not trying to win. She was trying to create chaos. Her pilots scattered in 12 different directions, each one attacking a different target. Missiles flew. Lasers burned. The Korthax ships, built for coordinated fleet battles, struggled to respond to enemies that would not stand still. They are breaking formation, Lisa shouted. Keep hitting them. Do not let them regroup. The enemy ships began to chase her squadron, leaving their positions around the base. 100 ships. 200. 300. All chasing the tiny human fighters that danced around them like gnats around a giant. Daniel watched the display and felt hope rising in his chest. It was working. The plan was actually working. Signal the Imperial fleet, he ordered. Tell them to jump now. Space itself seemed to tear open as thousands of Imperial warships emerged from hyperspace. Dronathi battle cruisers, Luminari psionic vessels, Volkari carriers. They poured into the system like a flood, their weapons already firing. The Korthax fleet, scattered and confused, tried to reform. But it was too late. The Imperial ships cut through them with brutal efficiency. Without their communication relays, the enemy vessels could not coordinate. Without their fuel depots, they could not retreat. Without their power stations, the base could not activate its defenses. Kevin Park and his team fought their way toward the escape pods. The station was falling apart around them, explosions shaking the walls, debris flying through the air. One of his soldiers, a young woman named Rita, took a piece of metal to her leg and went down. Kevin grabbed her and kept moving. I cannot walk, Rita gasped. Then I will carry you. He threw her over his shoulder and ran. Behind them, the station began to collapse. Ahead of them, an escape pod waited. They made it with seconds to spare. The pod ejected just as the station exploded completely. A ball of fire that lit up the darkness of space. Kevin held Rita's hand as they floated away from the destruction. We did it, he whispered. We actually did it. The battle raged for 18 hours. By the end, the Korthax base was a spreading field of wreckage. Their fleet was destroyed, scattered across the system in pieces. The Imperial forces had won a complete victory, but the cost had been high. Out of the 12 pilots in Lisa Cole's squadron, only 4 survived. Lisa herself had been shot down, her fighter destroyed, her body never recovered. 3 of the infiltration teams had been lost entirely. Over 200 human soldiers had died. Daniel read the casualty reports in silence. Each name was a person he had sent into battle. Each death was a weight on his soul. Emma found him alone in his quarters, staring at the wall. We won, she said softly. The Queen got her victory. Earth is safe. Daniel nodded slowly. We won. But I keep thinking about Lisa, about all the others. They trusted me. They followed me into that hell. They knew the risks. They chose to go anyway. That is what makes them heroes. Daniel looked at her. Does being a hero matter when you are dead? Emma sat down next to him. It matters to the people who are still alive. It matters to their families. It matters to the children who will grow up in a universe where the Korthax fear humanity. She took his hand. You gave them a chance to be something greater than themselves. That is all any leader can do. Daniel was quiet for a long moment. Then he stood up and straightened his uniform. The Queen wants to see me, he said. Apparently, she has an announcement to make. Emma smiled sadly. Then let us go hear what she has to say. They walked out together, leaving the casualty reports behind. The names would stay with Daniel forever. But the mission was not finished yet. There was still one more chapter to write. 1 month after the Battle of Valdris, Daniel Hayes stood once again in the throne hall of the Volcari Empire. The room was exactly as he remembered it. The glowing white walls, the impossibly high ceiling, the thousands of alien delegates filling every corner. But something had changed. The way they looked at him was different now. Before, they had seen an insect, a primitive creature from a backwater world. Now, they saw something else. Daniel was not sure if it was respect or fear or something in between. But it was not contempt, not anymore. Emma walked beside him as they made their way through the crowd. Whispers followed them like shadows. That is the human commander. The one who destroyed Valdris. They say his people fight like demons. They say they have no fear of death. Daniel kept his face calm, but inside he felt every word. His people had paid for this moment with blood. Lisa Cole, Rita and her shattered leg, now healing in a medical bay. Kevin Park, who still woke up screaming from nightmares about the explosion. 200 soldiers who would never see Earth again. They had earned this moment. Whatever came next, they had earned it. The Queen sat on her throne, watching their approach with those strange, many-part eyes. She looked exactly the same as before, ancient and powerful and impossible to read. 2,000 years of ruling an empire had taught her to hide every thought, every feeling. Behind a mask of silver calm, Daniel stopped at the base of the throne and bowed. Emma did the same. Commander Hayes, the Queen said. Welcome back. Your Majesty. I received your summons. Indeed. I have heard the reports from Valdris. The Imperial commanders speak highly of your tactics. Admiral Karth, in particular, seems to have changed his opinion of humanity. Daniel allowed himself a small smile. The Admiral and I reached an understanding. He provides the firepower. We provide the chaos. An effective combination, it seems. The Queen paused, her eyes sweeping across the assembled delegates. But I did not summon you here to discuss tactics. I have a decision to announce, and I wanted you to hear it in person. Daniel felt his heart speed up. This was the moment. Everything humanity had fought for, everything his people had died for, came down to what happened in the next few minutes. The Queen rose from her throne. Every being in the hall bowed immediately. Daniel followed, bending low, feeling the weight of history pressing down on him. Rise, the Queen commanded. They obeyed. Thousands of eyes fixed on the ancient ruler as she descended from the dais, walking slowly toward Daniel with measured steps. The hall was so quiet that Daniel could hear his own breathing. The Queen stopped directly in front of him. She was taller than him by nearly a foot, her silver skin reflecting the soft glow of the walls. Up close, Daniel could see tiny patterns in her face, lines and marks that told stories of ages beyond human understanding. Commander Hayes, she said, her voice carrying to every corner of the vast hall. Your species has been a subject of much debate these past weeks. Many in my council believe humanity is too dangerous to be trusted, too unpredictable, Too chaotic. Daniel said nothing. He simply waited. They argue that humanity should be contained, restricted to your home system, prevented from spreading further into the galaxy. The Queen paused. Some have even suggested that humanity should be eliminated entirely before you become a threat that cannot be controlled. The words hit Daniel like physical blows, but he kept his face steady. Beside him, Emma had gone pale. I have listened to these arguments carefully, the Queen continued. I have weighed the evidence. I have considered the future of this empire and the safety of the species under my protection. She turned away from Daniel and looked out at the assembled delegates. Her voice rose, filling the hall. 10,000 years ago, the Valkyrie were prey. Weak creatures hiding in caves, hunted by predators we could not hope to defeat. We survived not through strength, but through cunning and determination. We learned. We adapted. We found ways to turn our weakness into strength. She turned back to Daniel. Humanity reminds me of what we once were. Young, desperate, dangerous. Not because of your weapons or your ships, but because of what burns inside you. That refusal to surrender. That stubborn insistence on survival against all odds. The Queen raised her hand, and the hall fell absolutely silent. The galaxy has grown old and tired. The elder races have forgotten what it means to struggle, to fight, to reach beyond what seems possible. Perhaps it is time for new blood. Perhaps it is time for chaos. She looked directly into Daniel's eyes. I have made my decision. And then she spoke one sentence. Humanity is hereby granted full membership in the Valkyrie Accord, with all rights and responsibilities thereof, effective immediately. The hall fell silent. Daniel stood frozen. He could not move. He could not breathe. He could not think. The words echoed in his mind, but they seemed impossible. Full membership. No species younger than 1,000 years had ever been granted full membership. It meant protection under imperial law, access to ancient technologies, a voice in galactic governance. It meant humanity was no longer alone. The silence stretched on. Delegates stared at each other in shock. Some looked angry. Others looked afraid. A few, Daniel noticed, were nodding slowly, as if they had expected this all along. Finally, Daniel found his voice. Your Majesty, he said, his words barely a whisper. Why? The Queen smiled. It was a strange expression on her alien face, but it seemed almost warm. Because, Commander Hayes, you have done something no other young species has ever done. You have not simply survived. You have forced the universe to notice you. You have made the elder races remember that strength is not everything. That courage matters. That chaos can change the shape of history. She turned and began walking back toward her throne. Do not make me regret this decision, young one. The universe is watching what humanity does next. Daniel straightened his back and saluted, a human gesture that somehow felt right in this moment. We will do our best, Your Majesty, he said. And when our best is not enough, we will find a way to do the impossible instead. The Queen reached her throne and sat down. I believe you will. That is precisely why I'm so interested to see what happens next. She waved her hand, and the audience was over. Daniel turned and walked out of the hall. Emma hurried to keep up with him. Neither of them spoke until they were outside, standing in the bright light of the alien sun. Then Emma grabbed his arm and spun him around. Did that just happen? She demanded. Did we just become full members of the Valkyrie Accord? Daniel looked up at the sky. Somewhere out there, Earth was waiting for news. Millions of people watching their screens, hoping and praying and waiting to learn their fate. Yeah, he said softly. I think it did. Emma laughed. It was a sound of pure joy, pure relief, pure disbelief. She threw her arms around him and hugged him tight. "We did it," she whispered. "We actually did it." Daniel hugged her back, feeling tears forming in his eyes. He thought about Lisa Cole, flying her fighter into the enemy fleet. He thought about Kevin Park, crawling through those dark tunnels with explosives on his back. He thought about every soldier who had fought and died so that humanity could reach this moment. "No," he said quietly. "They did it. All of them. We just carried their sacrifice to the finish line." They stood there for a long moment, two humans alone on an alien world, holding each other as the weight of history settled around them. The war with the Korthax would continue. New challenges would arise. The elder races would struggle to accept the chaotic humans now walking among them as equals. Nothing would be easy, but humanity had proven something today. They had proven that being small did not mean being weak. They had proven that being young did not mean being worthless. They had proven that the fire inside them, that stubborn refusal to give up, could change the course of the entire galaxy. Daniel looked out at the stars, at the infinite possibilities stretching before his species like an ocean without shores. The Queen had spoken one sentence. The hall had fallen silent, and Daniel had stood frozen, alone, in the center of the greatest moment in human history. But he was not alone anymore. None of them were. Humanity had earned its place among the stars, and this was only the beginning.